thank you so much, Nandi, for joining us. I want to just introduce you very briefly, but you'll unveil yourself as we go through the conversation. Nandi Scorer, you were part of the selection process of us going to Mount Everest in 1996. It was in fact in 1995 when the whole thing got kickstarted. Because the expedition was in April, as I recall, because I had my birthday, my 26th birthday on Everest in 1996. So the expedition was between April and June. And I remember getting, I think my first awareness of the Everest expedition may have happened in November of 1995, October, November.
Yeah.
So that's kind of when the whole thing kicked off. And my first question to you, Nandi, is like, when did you come across the invitation and through which medium? Because it was in various media, but through which medium did you come across the invitation for a woman to, join the Everest expedition back then?
So it was actually my late mother-in-law, my ex-late mother-in-law, who I think saw it in the Sunday Times. And I was at a stage in my life where I was kind of doing any adventure that was happening, if it was, and to be honest, climbing, I'd never even climbed in the Drakensberg. So, I mean, that was,
Oh, wow.
So this wasn't something about, oh my goodness, I've been climbing all my life. This would be an amazing experience. And there was an application and a bit of a descriptor in the Sunday Times. And my ex-mom-in-law had cut it out. And she sort of said to me, oh, Nandi, you've done Comrades and you've done this and you've done that. So what about this now?
Yes.
And I brought it home and I thought about it for a little while. And then I thought, why the hell not? So I put together an application, not for 1 minute thinking that I would get through the first gate, because surely the first gate is you've climbed more than Table Mountain, yeah, and you at least own climbing shoes. But I got through, so that's how I came about it.
So that's interesting to me because I do remember us being a fairly, if I could put it this way, with the exception of maybe Jackie and Kathy, we were a fairly inexperienced bunch that went through this selection. I mean, I'd had a couple of hikes behind me and, all of that type of stuff. But in general, from a climbing perspective, we were relatively inexperienced. So you were before that involved in, you said you ran Comrades. What other kind of adventurous things were you into?
So I played sport of every kind. I was incredibly fit. I'd done all the swims you could do. I'd done all the cycle races you could do. So they were all sort of traditional sport. It was only mere years later that I did the Cape Tourist yacht race and stuff. But at that time, it was very much sort of sport. It was
Yes.
sport at quite a high level and whatever. And that was, but climbing, I'd always, when people had gone, come on a hike or whatever, I'd go, can I run the route? Because this hiking thing is very slow and very boring. And yeah, I think I had a very strong energy drive at the time.
For that, yeah.
So hiking sounded like something that was, if you could do it in an hour, why take 5 days? And but nevertheless, there was something quite alluring about this. As we talk about it, and when I think back to the journaling that I did at that time, I think there was something that I was searching for myself, a very, very personal, and I kept trying to find it in different activities. Because I still clearly, when I go back into my diaries, I kind of came down from Kili, which was the experience we had, and I still just felt I felt like I hadn't filled up what I was.
Something still missing.
Yeah. So I don't think, I think the activities were more about geography than motivation. And the motivation was, there's got to be more to it than this. Am I fulfilling everything? So I
Yeah.
think that's what drove it. Yeah.
So, Nandi, if I think back now, I mean, some of the things that happened during our selection process sticks out to me because of you. Because you had such a sense of fun and your sense of humor. You just kept us cackling all the time. When I was talking to Cynthia, she said, we had so much fun and we laughed a lot. And then I remember it's because you had all these crazy quips that used to come out of your mouth. I remember on the first day of going up the mountain, we were going through the forest area, and there was a herd of buffalo just looking at us and us looking at them. And I was feeling quite terrified that they could just break into a gallop and come at us, and you diffused the whole situation by saying, oh, they're probably looking at us going, who are those smelly creatures standing on that side? And I remember that to this day. And, the lesson I learned in that from you was it doesn't matter how daunting a situation is, find the humor. And
Oh, wow.
and I'm really grateful to you for that because it's stuck with me. And so I think it's a testament to who you were when you showed up for that selection. So I want to go a little bit back and ask the question, because you also shared with us where you grew up, how you got the name Nandi, which is not an English girl's name. And just give us a little bit of perspective from there.
That's so interesting, and I'm not sure if it's a personality flaw that I kind of use humor to diffuse stuff. I think that still lives with me. Um, the I think what drove a lot of it was an attitude of perhaps first and foremost, I didn't honestly believe that I had a real chance to be selected. So maybe apropos a conversation that I had with Ian on the mountain one evening, um, I'm not sure, hand on my heart, that I really wanted to do it.
Okay.
And it wasn't, and that was quite far into the process, by the way, because I started very naively. But so I looked at the event. I felt that there was quite a competitive meta script amongst the girls.
Mm.
And I like to think that I was immune from that because I wasn't invested in the outcome.
Okay.
And I thought I kind of went universe, and if I'm meant to be go, then I will. But other than that, I thought, let me just share these incredible women, these really incredible women from such different upbringings, backgrounds, etc., and let me learn as much as I can from them as human beings.
Mm.
And this is a fabulous adventure. For all Ian's faults, he was phenomenal at getting sponsorship, getting the kit together, making stuff happen.
Yeah.
And we all arrived there, we were given boots and gear, and
Yeah.
I mean it was like blow you away. So
Yeah.
um so perhaps some of it was personality, some of it was attitude about going in. Um, there was a lightness about it. There was a learning experience, and there was a hell of an adventure.
Mm.
So I think that's what drove perhaps the approach and attitude.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, on a
Yeah.
hockey field, I could be incredibly competitive if I was invested in the outcome or whatever, but I wasn't invested in this outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're quite right. It's not like we were overtly competitive, but the energy of competition was there. And I just remember Jackie kind of really putting out quite a strong competitive sense of I belong here and I'm most likely to achieve this selection. So I remember Jackie having quite a strong sense of she knows she belongs in the mountains, therefore this is her crown to carry type of thing. Kathy was a lot more pensive and shy and withdrawn, but she had a steely nature. She was very tough on the inside, I could tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was an amazing thing. You know, some people called it a beauty contest. I suppose that's the kind of label you get when you put a whole bunch of women together to compete for something. But there was something more than that. There was a strength and a fortitude that I so admired in each and every single one of us. But like I said, you stood out for me because you really helped me to find humor in the difficulty of the whole situation. So yeah, there was really something special in that.
That's thank you. That's lovely feedback. I often wondered what the criteria for selection was, given that there were a couple of safeguards, these people know from mountains, and then there are a couple of interesting off the wall characters. What did Ian one day, the advertising executive or whatever. But I often wondered what the criteria was. And yeah, they definitely, I mean, a lot of my sense is that Ian was doing a lot of it for the show of it and so I wondered if the selection also didn't make sure I'd have someone who can be good with the media. I've got, somebody, but there was something quite common between us all.
Mm,
And my observation of that in a very different way, you spoke about being scared of the buffalo or whatever, but there was an intense self-sufficiency amongst each and every one of us.
mm,
They, not one of us needed somebody to take care of us or to, there was a strong sense of that. You'll just get on with it. You're resilient. Yeah,
yeah.
which I thought was quite common, expressed very differently.
Yes.
Like you say, Kathy, in my experience, because I actually shared a tent with her and things like that. For me, she was the most competitive of all. Um, in that you use the word steely, cold, steely. Yeah. So that Jackie in her, I think a lot of it was driven by insecurity, but nevertheless, there was a self-sufficiency
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
don't need anyone to take care of me.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
I do
and
remember that about Jackie. Yes. Back to our selection process, because I'm quite curious. If we didn't know what the criteria were for selection, it's very interesting that we all had to fill in a kind of entry form and motivate for why we should be on the expedition, right? So, or why we should be considered for selection, because the initial amount of people of women were, I think, 200. There were 200 plus women. I don't know the exact amount, but confirmed at least 200 women who applied and saw the same article. There were two ways to apply. There was the Sunday Times Everest Expedition, the Sunday Times entry form, and I think in Out There magazine. Do you remember Out There
yeah.
magazine also?
Yeah, could. Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
Cynthia came through Out There magazine. So then, of course, we went through a series of experiences together. I'm sure we all had one-on-ones with Ian, and after we were shortlisted down to a group of 6 women. And then, do you remember we went out to the Pilansberg for what was a kind of weekend of orientation and chatting about what to expect should we make it, and just all the different logistical things that had to go with if we were to make it to the mountain. So do you remember have you got any memory from the Pilansberg orientation weekend?
And I remembered first of all meeting all of the girls, and at that was still the early stage, and getting a sense of who, and you know how we all kind of dance around each other in those early phases. What I do recall from day one, and it might be that I have a passion about leadership. Um, in fact, the reason I've been put on earth is to rid the world of bad leadership.
Mm.
So ask me how that's going so far. Um, and I remember probably the strongest thing was the sense of Ian's personality and approach.
Mm.
And it being very much the autocratic, very much um, I can't think of the words, but the intense. I'm not qualified to diagnose, but if one looks at the traits of a narcissist, the kind of the narcissism around
Mm.
him.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
remember coming back from that weekend, the various conversations and the way he handled them and whatever. And I remember coming back and speaking to my then husband and saying to him, this is what I think is happening. This is the leadership we're going to be dealing with.
Mm.
I have a decision to make that I either continue because I have a problem with that kind of leadership, or alternatively, I acknowledge that I know zip about the mountain. I
Mm.
really know zip. And here is someone at face value who knew a huge amount.
Mm.
And so the decision was, if I'm going to go with it, then I'm not going to do what Jackie did. And that was a clash with the personality
Yeah.
involved. Not to just roll over and play dead, but just acknowledge that I'm very much in the group of these women. I felt like the greenie.
Wow.
And I thought, what an honor, what a privilege. I'm going to go along and just learn
Yeah.
everything there is to learn. So put the ego aside
Mm.
and just go along with it as an exploratory journey.
Yeah. And
So that's what I remember from very early on.
I recall you being a person of strength because I guess at that time you had considerably more life experience than I had, I think. I'm not sure how old were you when you applied for the thing? 95?
I don't know. I'd have to do some sums. So I'm 64 now. How
Now,
old are
okay,
you?
so 56. So
Okay. Okay. So
yeah,
we
so
had a
you had a decade on me, which means you would have obviously seen a number of things that I wouldn't have seen, not having been a single woman, having not, been around the adult world for that many years. And so I think your perspective would have helped you to understand his leadership style, which I would not have. I mean, I was so blind to the idea that I'm getting the opportunity of a lifetime. I was willing to put up with any and every kind of toxicity just so that I could get to the mountain. So your perspective was incredible. I mean, the fact that you could pick that up so early in the process, and yet then you made a conscious decision of what your options were and how you're going to approach it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. Not that many years, but almost a decade. And I'd been in business during all of that
Yes.
period.
Yeah.
And in even at a young age in leadership roles. So so you're right. It had never I've never stopped to think that people such as yourself would not have had that lens.
Yeah.
I just assume you always assume everyone has the same lens as you
Yeah.
do. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, having
interesting.
having played sport myself and having been captains in
Mm,
various sports and having done a whole variety of other things, in a sense, leading, I could see his style, but I didn't have the deep perspective that you had on what you're dealing with. I could just see that this guy likes things his own way, and the best way to survive under his leadership is to follow instructions.
mm,
I actually created a whole theory around leadership based on my observations in the mountains, specifically with Ian's character in the thought of that, is that there is the kind of front-facing leader who is in charge, in control, my way or the highway. And there are leaders like that, and they are good
mm,
for certain periods of time. They are
mm,
specifically good in time of crisis. They
mm,
are specifically decision-making people, so they're not high collaborative,
mm,
but they do have this kind of psychosis of no one can do it as well as I can do it. and therefore they don't suffer idiots. And if you show any kind of I say idiots, but I mean, they don't, in their minds, they don't suffer fools. And then if you do come against their ideology or perspective, or you challenge them in any way, you become the enemy that needs to be eliminated. So that's the kind of leadership, with hindsight, after having observed Ian and a number of other climbing leaders in the mountains, I've seen that there are effective ways to lead up a mountain, and there are non-effective ways to lead. And so it's an interesting thing that I've been playing around for many years now, and run some workshops on. So I'm very interested in your perspective on him as a leader as well.
Look, I'm sharing it now with hindsight. So perhaps my observation and assessment was a lot shallower than it is now. But I did go home with a very definite thing about needing to make a choice. And if I'm not going to be able to butt heads here, and we're going to have to go, I'm just interested in, maybe we do it at another time, but I'm very interested in, because the autocratic sense of leadership can be helpful in times of crisis, etc. And one could argue that climbing Everest is a journey through crisis.
Precisely.
And so I would be interested in whether you think, therefore, that Ian's leadership style was appropriate for the mountain. And if not, what would be better?
I actually think we can have a whole conversation around that, because I then since discovered a more effective way to lead, but it's not to say that way to lead is not effective, you know what I mean? But I don't want to unpack it too much here, because there's still a few questions that we need to cover.
Okay.
So we did the Pilanesberg thing, then we went off to Mount Meru. And in fact, we climbed this was unprecedented. We climbed 2 high altitude expeditions as novices in 2 weeks. We went from Mount Meru, which is a 4,500 meter peak, a trekking peak nonetheless, but the next week we went to Kilimanjaro, and that was our selection process, basically, to see if we could do that kind of intensity in such a short space of time, given the pressure of we're also competing, to get to the big one.
Do you know what? You've just thrown something at me. Again, in my fuzzy memory around things, Mount Meru was almost part of Kilimanjaro, but you're right. It was one and then the other.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So quite an intense 2 weeks of having to prove that we have what it takes to be in that kind of environment, under the scrutiny and leadership of Ian Woodall, as we've just unpacked. Under the conditions of, we're actually here for competition, but at the same time, we formed some strong friendships during that period as well. And also knowing that at some point this is going to end and someone's going to be chosen and another person not. What do you remember of that time? What was your prevailing kind of thoughts? How did you process it all?
Unless I'm just blocking out any bad bits or whatever, I just remember it as a remarkable privilege to be doing that.
Yeah.
And hiking, not climbing or whatever, but hiking a mountain, which was a first for me. So it felt just so incredible. If anything, and I started off today's session with the kind of trying to find myself, I suppose. If anything, the staggering experience was around the hours that you are walking with yourself.
Yes.
And the time for self-reflection, and the time for getting busy in your head. And sometimes the head isn't the best place to be hanging out, but it very much that forced left, right, it's and I think the early days, maybe it was on Meru and maybe even earlier, but because of that undercurrent of competitiveness, there was probably a lot more, I'm doing this and I'm walking on my own, as opposed to, hello, how's it? Come and walk with me and come
Yeah.
and chat. Because the early days of the hike, I don't remember as being all chatty and a bunch of friends going on a hike at all.
Yeah.
It almost felt like a task.
Yes, yes. I think the first two
Yeah,
days may have been a bit more chatty on Kilimanjaro, for instance, because we went through
yeah,
rainforest and then it was also pleasant. But I've noticed this with every single mountain I've ever been on. The nervous energy of tackling the mountain at the bottom is there, so people are chatty. And the higher up you go, the more you spread out because people climb at different pace, and the more you're in your head because you're now finding yourself on your own, but also the less physical resources there are. So there's not enough oxygen, so you've got to conserve energy, and you're on your own. The next person's about maybe 10-15 minutes ahead of you. So there's all of that plays a role in one sort of getting into the space of, it's just me in my head right now. And it doesn't force you, it naturally migrates to you getting to the point of thinking quite deeply about your life, your choices, the things you must do when you're done, processing a sense of sort of discomfort, failure, the pain, the cold, the hunger, there's a whole variety of things that one has to manage within yourself while you're on that slope. And I think we don't give enough credence to the idea of the people who are on the slope actually do the work of peak performance, because we've been bamboozled by this concept that peak performance is only when you reach the mountain, right? But peak performance is on the slopes, isn't it?
yeah. Oh, I've never thought about it like that, but that is the absolute truth. And I think the to build on that, I've always thought that solo sailing is the ultimate of any sport because of that. You're dealing with the elements, you do all of that, and you're dealing with what's going on in
Yourself.
here. The other thing for me that I came away was, so 10 of you head out to climb it, but it's not a team sport. Climbing is not a team sport.
Yeah.
And where I came out was when the people were selected, when you and Kathy were selected, my assessment of that, because the whole way along you're trying to work out what criteria are they looking for. Physical, I'm fine. Fit, I'm fine. You know, I was actually very lucky with altitude management and all of that kind of stuff. But I assessed that the two of you could manage yourselves better than perhaps the rest of us. I
Really?
can't speak for the other girls, but if I was on the selection panel, I would have gone, this is not true, but they probably would have gone, actually, Nandi needs to be leading people. She needs to have people around her, you know, whatever, because the way she gets through life is good. And I'm making this up as I go along, but, you
Yeah.
know, there's that engagement with people that drives her. Whereas perhaps my assessment of you and Kathy was that if you didn't actually need anybody around you. And it's interesting that ties back to the self-sufficiency,
Yeah.
which I sensed amongst all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But strongest among, and strongest with Kathy.
So in my case, it's because I was a team player. So I knew that if you're in team, there's a captain, there's a vice captain, and the rest of you are there to support the work of the captain and the vice captain. And there were times when I'd be captain and I expected that from others. So I went in knowing that Ian is captain and I'm there to support the work of captain. And so I did have opinions of my own, but I knew, and especially from observing Jackie, that you don't just blurt out your opinion you could quietly go to the side and ask a question to find out about a thing, but don't make it confrontational in front of an audience. So that's kind of how I managed that. My response to that style of leadership was really to be more diplomatic and a soft power type of thing. Which brings me again to the understanding that followers have a role to play in how effective leaders are. You know, I mean, the world has always talked about leadership, leadership, leadership. But if you think about it, it's often the quality of the followers that bring about the effort and accolade of the leader.
That is so interesting, that because I have a slightly different perspective on.
Oh, great! Yeah,
for me, for me, the leader is the servant. The only job of the leader is to get stuff done, and their skill is in getting it done through other people and what the other people's strengths and things like that are.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just a personal thing. I understand the autocratic thing being quite good in a crisis or whatever, but that's if the assumption that the counter to that is Cyril Ramaphosa. Let's hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and let's not anyone make any decisions or whatever. I don't see it as clearly cut as that. I find it difficult to find a place or an explanation for autocratic leadership.
I suppose as we finish our conversation, I'd like to just work out with you. You didn't have an expectation of being selected, but there was a selection process. We got to a moment where it was decided that Kathy and I will then go to base camp, and from there they would choose which one goes up the mountain. What was your processing of that experience at the time?
So nobody, I think, knows this, but I had a conversation with Ian, it doesn't matter when, during the process. And I said to him, I don't know what the words were. I didn't say I'm withdrawing from the race or the whatever, but I had a conversation that went something like, I think any one of the other 5 women is a better candidate, because it feels to me like they want it more than I do.
Okay. Did you say that to him before the decision or after?
Yeah, before the
Okay.
decision. Yeah, it's not to say that I would have been chosen, because I have no thoughts that I would have at all. But I did indicate that I was probably in a more aggressive and faster time of my life than spending weeks on an ice cold mountain walking up and down slowly.
Yeah.
So that puts why did I have that conversation with him? I suppose at the time I thought, in the unlikely event he were to choose me and then I pull out, bad optics. Bad optics.
Yeah.
Also, rather move me out of the decision tree before the time. So yeah.
You see, that right there to me is an example of effective followership. So in this scenario, you are a follower, you can see what the leader's up to, you can sense your tension with that level of leadership and what the outcomes could be if you continued. So as an effective follower, you then enhance the ability of leadership to make a good decision by being so introspective and being so self-aware that you're actually assisting the leadership in the decision they need to make. Can you see that?
Oh,
that distinction?
I can. Okay. I remember being really nervous to have the conversation, and I remember still doing my dad always used to say, do a list of pros and cons, and the pros outweighed the cons. The cons were more about my ego, my feeling like I'd been, bad because I'd been chosen on all that kind of stuff. But I still remember joking with Ian. He didn't have a great sense of humor, but I remember joking with him and kind of saying, if I can run to base camp, I was a heavy runner at that time.
Yeah,
If I
yeah.
can run to base camp and back, and I think they've subsequently put
There
in
is
like
a
a base
marathon.
camp
There is a
marathon or something.
marathon. Yes.
But
It
at the
wasn't there
time
at
there
the
wasn't.
time.
I
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go and do that. So that was my experience of it. So I wasn't sitting there with a, oh my goodness, have I fared? We don't really know what the criteria are, which for me, Leadership 101,
Mm.
give your people a sense of what they're working towards. Um, but so there wasn't any that I then could sit almost objectively go, that's interesting. Who's that? Why that?
Yeah.
It was no surprise to me at all that
Okay.
you and Kathy were chosen. You were the right choices. No two ways
That's
about it.
actually, it's amazing to hear it from a fellow competitor because, obviously in conversation with Ian, you would have said you and Kathy were the best decisions or you were the right choice, but that's from the bias of his decision making. So so
Yeah.
you go to the person and say, why did you select me? And he'd go, well, because I made a good decision. But to hear it
Yeah.
from a fellow competitor for me is actually quite illuminating because you could have gone away saying, I don't know why that Deshun or that Kathy girl were chosen. And in fact, the media wanted to spin it like we were chosen because we were the most subservient of the six, So there was definitely that kind of, oh, they're the two most pliable of the girls that were selected. And so I thought that was quite an interesting take on why you would take the most subservient girls up a mountain like Mount Everest. But yeah, that was definitely part of
No,
the narrative.
there was only one who wasn't compliant, and that was Jackie.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Jackie messed up her chances very early on in the process. And to be honest, I would find it difficult to be responsible for somebody who was so contrary and
Yeah.
often contrary for the sake of it. Outside of that, I think we were all compliant. I mean, Cynthia was compliant. Who were the six of us? I can't even remember the.
There was Annalie, you, myself, Cynthia, Jackie, and Kathy.
Apart from Jackie, we were all compliant. We were all very, not in awe of Ian, but in awe of not messing up the opportunity
Yeah.
of a
I think that's
lifetime.
what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the end of the whole thing, Kathy a dead cert, because for me you really had to not really care about, I don't mean that in an ugly way, but you're very self-sufficient.
Mm.
And you had I don't know, you had such a self-sufficiency and this strength, but there was a curiosity about you that I thought would be good.
Mm.
There was a naivety, there was a curiosity and naivety, which I
Oh, well, that
thought
sums me up.
but I thought you would have the courage and you'd have the strength to do whatever it took.
Yeah.
So no, for me it was a no-brainer as to who went.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's really great to know. When I do my keynotes, I often share the letter that we all got to say that we've been selected to go through a process of selection or shortlisted rather. And when I share that with my audiences, I say, only 6 women in this country got this letter. And now that letter is a piece of history. And I show it to my audience, I read it to them. And it feels like the past kind of jumps back at me when I do that, and it's just such a privilege to know that, because I think you would probably remember this, that there was a time when the media tried to spin the idea of me being on the mountain as your sort of blackface. I was picked up from the township and just
Yeah.
put on the so the idea that there was it was actually an extensive selection process. We had to climb those 2 mountains in 2 weeks. We had to do the orientation in the Pilansberg. We had to go through all these things. So there was a process of elimination. And so that narrative that people can create for why you belong, and I think we women have this often, especially in leadership, where there's an assumption about how you got into that space. The assumptions are not that you earned it, that you went through your own process to get there. The assumption could be, oh, you know, the boss has a sweet spot for her, that's why she's in that position. And so for us as women who have led, who are still leading, it's so important that we're able to showcase our process of getting to a point. I know men don't have to do this. When a man steps into leadership, it's just assumed that he earned it, right? But there still is the gravity of women having to prove their why. Why am I here? Why am I sitting in this space? Why am I sitting at the boardroom table? Why was I invited to come and be part of this decision-making panel? Or so I think for women to do what you've just done is to say, when I saw you being selected, it was obvious because you had these and these and these qualities. It's so empowering, because we come across so much of the opposite of we have to prove that we actually belong in the space. You know, so yeah, that's a takeaway for me from our chat.
So I've just a question, rhetorical question. As a woman in leadership who's had to kind of not sleep my way to the top, but, you know, fight my way to the top, how much do you think of that need to just not justify, but explain our way? How much of that do you think is for others, and how much of that do you think is for ourselves?
That's
because we still battle with a huge
imposter syndrome.
There's a imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And I sometimes, when I talk to somebody such as yourself, who has been remarkable right from the first day I ever met you, and I mean remarkable and different and all of that stuff, and then I hear you talking about we as women needing to do that, I start going, is it for us actually? Because do we not yet have the assumption and the entitlement that men have, that they don't? And maybe I'm just thinking of it now, maybe the justification is partly for us, and if that's the case, then that's fine. If that's a good enough reason, then that's a good enough reason.
Yeah.
But I wonder if and when our justifying that doesn't perhaps sometimes undermine ourselves in leadership roles.
Yeah. And I really love the way you framed that, because a lot of my observation is from having coached women in senior leadership positions, and watching how people respond to them. So if you have now been made the senior manager of a division in a company, what I've noticed is that when that happens to a man, the people around him go out of their way to make him succeed, to make him look good, to support him, to help him achieve the things that are in his blind spots. And when a woman steps into that situation or gets given that opportunity, people almost fold their arms because they want to see at what point you're going to implode. And it's observation. I'm not saying this happens to everyone, but I've literally seen how people go, well, we'll just have to see if she's going to be able to make it. So the switch doesn't go on, oh, we've got a new leader, we've got to do what we can to get this leader to succeed on our behalf and with us. That's what people do with a man. With a woman, they kind of go, I don't know, let's see how she copes. And I hope it's not so true for everyone. I've just observed it in a number of situations.
And I'm sure a lot. The in my very fortunate levels going through leadership in organizations, etc., I have also observed what you're talking about. But mine has a slightly more detail to it. Firstly, when men step into the role, they step in as if they should have given me this job a long time ago. So I've tried it out. When I was put in a senior role, I had to play act it, but I
Yeah.
acted as if
Yeah.
like
It
what's
belongs to
taken
you.
them so long?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a different response. Instead of
Mm.
being a bit humble and a little bit apologetic, as many of us women can be about these things,
Yeah.
and just stepping in with it. So
Mm.
that was the first thing. The other thing I noticed was that the ones, generalization, the ones who folded their arms and went, let's see if you can do it, were the women, not the men.
Mm. Yes, I've seen that too. I've seen that too. Yes.
Interesting.
Yes, definitely. Yeah,
Many women have battled with other
with other
women.
women.
Uh,
I've seen
yeah.
that too. So it sounds to me like we can have a whole other session just unpacking the leadership dynamics that we've come across over the years. I've been very fortunate to take people up mountains myself as a leader, and there's quite a lot that I gleaned from how Ian approached the thing. Not all of it, but there have been some cases where I've been like, you know what? And I've taken novices, complete novices. I mean, I won't mention a name, but one of my clients had never been in a tent before. Um, in fact, quite a few. I've had quite a few clients like that. But then the sense of responsibility for that person makes you step into nanny mode. Like, I'm going to micromanage this person's decisions because they are in my, I'm responsible for their safety and their survival. So they've got to do everything I say. So that's something I picked up from Ian, is when you're in that kind of environment, you almost have to step into a kind of autocratic, do as I say, because I know what's going on around here and you don't. And it has. I've got 100% success rate with my clients making it home safely. So, there
Amazing.
is that thing where you've got to brief people ahead of time and say, listen, we're going into uncharted territory for you. I've done this a number of times. I've had different types of clients, and the ones who make it are the ones who do as I say. And yeah, so there is that part of it. And I don't know if that translates well into business leadership, but certainly on the mountains, it helps a great deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just
And I think sailing races are the same. There's no, it's autocratic. You have
yeah,
one skipper on the boat, and there's
yeah.
not like, let's have a quick conversation about stuff.
Mm.
It's very, so
Yeah.
perhaps because you can die. You fall
Yeah,
over, you can die.
absolutely. It is the high
Yeah.
risk, high reward kind of environment. So interesting to that. So my question to you, just out of curiosity, is once we were on expedition and the whole thing was happening, were you following it at all? Did you form any uh, perception or new ideas around the whole expedition itself? Can you remember anything that stands out? We had a big disaster on the mountain. Bruce Herod passed away after the big disaster. So there was a lot happening in the 96 expedition. Did you follow it? What did you take away from that?
I very definitely did follow it. In fact, when we came back, I got quite involved behind the scenes with helping with the logistics, and it
Oh,
was
wow.
also what I'd promised Ian. I
Mm.
said, look, I'll step back, but I'll come and give some. So I was assisting him behind the scenes with getting equipment and looking at sponsors and all of that kind of stuff. Um, so I knew the people involved, etc., etc. Um, the obviously followed the expedition to see how things were going. Used to get incredibly upset when there was negative publicity about it, and there was lots of armchair comments
Oh,
and
yeah.
expertise, and
Always.
oh yeah. And people who knew that I'd been part of, they'd go, well, tell us really about what like Ian is about, and why didn't he go and save Bruce, and
Yeah.
whatever. And you would try and explain how they'd say to me, do you judge him? And I don't know what happened on the mountain, but what I do know is that I didn't lay any blame anywhere,
Yeah.
because I tried to explain to them, and I hadn't even done the heights that you guys had done, that when you're walking and someone is like, you can just see them over there. In those conditions, it could take you an hour to get to
Hours.
them. It's not No,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so this camaraderie, and I go back to that ability to, and the maturity and the self-sufficiency to make the right choice for yourself.
Mm.
I understand you need a leader on the mountain and they drive you, but ultimately, when it comes down to that moment, do I
Yeah.
turn back now? That is your choice. There is
Absolutely.
no,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I was sad when the three climbers dropped out
Mm.
because I thought, completely understand it. You're dealing with rock stars, they see themselves as rock stars. They're individuals. It's
Mm.
not a team sport.
Mm.
But give Ian his due. When those guys arrived up in Santon at the offices there or whatever, and were given the best equipment and the best this and an air ticket and a whatever, um, again, I didn't judge the dynamics of the relationship, but I was sad about it
Mm. Yeah.
because, yeah,
Yeah.
once you're on the mountain, you doing your own thing, and maybe they should have. I don't know what happened behind the scenes.
I
So,
think the difference between them and Kathy and myself is that they were handpicked. And so they might have, in their own minds, created a sense of exclusivity. I am an exclusive type climber. And let me just say off the bat, I respect the things they had done in the mountains. So they were handpicked because of their abilities. They came in really, really competent and confident. And Ian handed an Everest opportunity to them on a silver platter. So
and the gear and the oxygen
everything,
and the air tickets. Yeah.
everything. And so, yes, you're right. There was maybe a bit of a rock star personality that came with it. Kathy and I had to earn our way to the mountain. And we had then walked a journey with Ian in the process of earning our way to the mountain. So the dynamics in our team on the way to base camp was literally them and us. And so the three climbers looked at Kathy and I as these two girls who just kind of like Ian picked them. We had nothing to do with it. We weren't there. We don't even know why they're here. And with me specifically, Andy Kay did not even bother to make eye contact with me. He did not acknowledge that I was there. I don't know if Kathy can say the same, but Andy literally would not acknowledge that I'm there. And so when we finally got our gear, which was a controversy on its own, because the climbing gear only arrived once we were, I think, in Dingboche or someplace like that. So I saw my crampons for the first time in Dingboche. And I remember asking Ian to show me how to use it, because obviously I'd never put on crampons before. And Ian was busy. He and Bruce were unpacking barrels and equipment and stuff. So I thought, okay, let me go and make conversation with Andy Kay just to break the ice, because he didn't act like he wanted me around. So I went over to him and I said, can you help me, show me how you put this onto the climbing boot? And he didn't even look at me. He just looked at the crampons in my hands and he said, why don't you go ask your leader? Those were his exact words. And it's the only words he spoke to me, basically. And so that was the dynamic in the team, is that there were the boys and then myself and Kathy. And of course, there was the team doctor, Charlotte, who was a lot more on the boys' side because, she aligned herself more with them than with us. So it was a very, very interesting dynamic where they felt that they were more worthy of being in charge of the expedition by the time we were on the trail. And by the time we got to a certain point, I think Namche, Ian had to turn around to go back to Kathmandu because there was an issue with our gear arriving or not arriving or whatever. So he had to go back to sort that out and left the team in charge with Bruce. So Bruce, now our deputy leader and team photographer, became our de facto leader for a couple of days on the trek. And that's when these guys thought, right, it's our opportunity now to usurp the leadership. and they gave Bruce a really hard time, and they started, it was real Survivor stuff, like if you watch the the program Survivor, it was a bit like that, I have to find your alliances and vote against this one or that one. And the only second other time that ADK spoke to me, he said to me that they have decided to either take over the leadership. They have decided, and it's my choice now. I'm the one who has to decide if I'm going to go with them, who know what they're doing, or with Ian, who doesn't know what he's doing. So my response to ADK was that I've been with Ian on expedition before. I've seen how he is on a mountain, and I trust how he is on a mountain. And I said to him, with you, this is the first time we're doing anything together. And up until now, you've not even spoken to me. So I said, whether I'm making a right or wrong decision, I am deciding to stick with Ian. And they were so mad because I was the swinging vote. Kathy was with Ian, Bruce was with Ian, but they now needed Desh to decide if she's coming this way or that way. And I said, absolutely not. I'm sticking with Bruce and Kathy and Ian. And that's when they decided they're going to come back home and spin a yarn. And the media picked up on it and just ran. That's what caused the team controversy, is how they came back to spin the yarn about us as a team, So it was very interesting times. We had controversy wrapped within controversy. And through all of that, we still had this mission to get the new democratic flag to the top of Mount Everest. It was really something, I tell you. Oh, goodness.
Sure. It's so beautiful to revisit this. You've just brought up, like just now you were talking about the letter we got. It's true. Heavens, I must have this letter somewhere. But
I'll show you. I'll show you what it looks like. Once we hit the record button, I'll remind you of a few things.
Yeah. Thank you for setting this up and for driving it and for the conversation.
Thanks, Nandi. Thank you.